Good evening, Placerville, and on behalf of the City Council, I'd like to welcome you to the regular scheduled City Council meeting of September 24th, 2013. And at this time, I'd like to invite you to stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And if I could ask Mr. Church to lead us off in the pledge, that would be wonderful.
Hands over your hearts. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oh, and with that, may we have the roll call, please, Mrs. Zito?
Certainly. Councilmember Borelli? Here. Vice Mayor Hagan?
Here.
Councilmember Patton?
Here.
Mayor Thomas?
Here?
Councilmember Wilkins?
Here. Thank you. And before we get to item number 3, I would like to extend a warm welcome to Chief Heller. This is your first official meeting of the City Council, and glad to have you with us tonight. And with that, we are on item 3, announcements and presentations to the public. And item 3.1, we have a very two distinguished guests in our audience tonight that have flown all the way from Washington, D.C. to address this council and this city. And we have David Church, our lobbyist, and his esteemed assistant, Madeline Morgan. And so we'd like to welcome you both to Placerville. And Mr. Church, please join us at the podium tonight.
Madam Mayor and members of the council, sometimes my hearing gets a little foggy. You did say distinguished and not extinguished, didn't you?
I did indeed.
I understand you have a rather abbreviated meeting tonight, so one of the things that I can promise you is that should you like, or if you're paid by the hour, I could extend this just indefinitely. We're fairly good at filibustering. Actually, the presentation tonight, I think a person that you know very well, Madeline Morgan, is with me, and she'd like to talk to you about a few things that are happening in Washington and as they relate here. And if there are really easy questions, I can field a couple of them. If they're difficult questions, she's going to take care of all the rest of it. Madeline?
Thank you, Mr. Church. Good evening, Madeline.
Good evening. First of all, I'd like to thank the City Council for allowing Mr. Church and I to come speak to you tonight. I'm very pleased to be back here in Placerville, and I'm looking forward to the next couple of days here. So, with that said, I'd like to talk about another fair city I'm quite fond of, Washington, D.C. I'm sure a lot of you are wondering what the hell is going on in D.C. right now. And the only way to put it is that it's a bit of a mess right now. And the two major issues are coming to an agreement on the continuing resolution and also an agreement with the debt limit. So to start off with the continuing resolution, each year Congress is required to pass appropriations bills. And if no appropriations bills are passed by September 30th at midnight, the government shuts down. So what Congress has been doing is passing continuing resolutions, which just allow Congress to spend until a certain date. And one thing I would like to note is that the budget is different from appropriations bills. The appropriations bills are something that has to be done, whereas a budget is not something that Congress is required to do. So with that in mind, just to tell you what's been going on with the continuing resolution, on Friday, September 20th, the House did pass a continuing resolution which funds the federal government through December 15th at a level of $986.3 billion. As in that bill, it also defunds the health care bill. So the way this originally started was that John Boehner and Eric Cantor were completely ready to pass a clean CR with no ideological amendments to it at all. And then Senators Ted Cruz from Texas and Mike Lee from Utah went to the House Republicans and told them that they should consider maybe putting an amendment in there defunding the health care law. So that got enough support, whereas Boehner was left with really no other option but to agree with that. So they passed that through the House, and now the Senate is actually right now in the middle of a filibuster by Ted Cruz in the Senate. as to whether or not they will even consider the House continuing resolution. So as of 5:30, Senator Cruz was still on the floor filibustering that, so we will wait and see where that goes. But another important thing to note is that after the House passed their continuing resolution, Senators Lee and Cruz decided that they didn't like that bill and they no longer want to defund the health care law. So that is why the filibuster is going on currently. So that's an issue that we'll have to wait and see, but I do have to be completely honest, it is likely that the federal government will shut down. So we'll just have to see where that goes. It's really kind of up in the air right now. And that leads me to the second fiscal debate going on, which is the debt limit. Currently, the Treasury Secretary Jacob Lew has stated that the debt limit of $16.7 trillion will be reached by mid-October. Now, whether that's, the second week in October or the third week in October, we don't know. It's really just going to be a matter of days when we know when exactly we will hit that limit. But with everything going on with the CR, the House has been able to draft a resolution for the debt limit. And something that they're taking a different approach this time. Instead of creating a monetary value, so instead of raising the debt limit from 16.7 trillion to say 20 trillion, instead they'd like to just decide on a specific date. Preferably it would be after the midterm elections next November, and just say that on whatever date we've reached the debt limit and we'll have to have this debate again. So that is an option that is appealing to both the Democrats in the House and Senate. However, along with this option, they're also considering defunding the health care law and also including instructions for a tax overhaul, which will most likely not be taken up, and also another sequester. So that's where that's at right now. Again, the Senate hasn't really stated anything specific that they'd like to do with the debt limit, but they have stated very specifically that they do not want to defund the health care law, and it's highly unlikely that that would even be able to happen. So once those issues are resolved, we then have the transportation bill, which expires next September 30th. And the major issue with that is that the Highway Trust Fund is having a very difficult time finding funding or even being able to be funded. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the gas tax has become obsolete. People aren't driving as many miles or at all, and there are so many vehicles now that don't even use gas as the main form of fuel. So that's another major issue, is how the Congress is going to resolve that issue. And they're throwing around some ideas already. They've talked about raising the gas tax, creating more toll roads and HOV toll lanes, putting a tax on tires and titles for your vehicles, and just some other options that they're considering with that. Actually, tomorrow, the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, chaired by your Senator Barbara Boxer, will be holding a hearing at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And the witnesses in that hearing will be mostly CEOs and presidents of highway companies that are very heavily influenced in the transportation industry. And the goal of that hearing is basically just trying to get some ideas flowing, maybe create an action plan for where they'd like to take this, because this is something that, Congress definitely wants to resolve, and they want to get some real action plans taken care of. So with those three major issues out of the way, the other couple of issues that Congress needs to address by the end of the year is immigration reform, postal service reform, and the Farm Bill, which is currently in Congress right now. They will be developing a conference committee for the Farm Bill because the House and Senate have both passed individual bills. And the major issue with that is that there's a huge difference in cuts to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or food stamps. So we're just waiting to see. Already the chairman in the House Agriculture Committee, Congressman Lucas, has said that most likely they will not reach an agreement by September 30th. So that will cause us to revert back to 1949 Farm Bill policies if they don't decide to just extend the current Farm Bill from 2008 for another year. So that's another issue that we will be keeping an eye on. And with that said, I'd like to turn it over back a little bit to what we're doing for Placerville. There are some great funding opportunities that I think would be some really good opportunities for the city of Placerville, one of which is through the Department of Agriculture, and it's the Rural Community Development Initiative. And this will help fund a lot of the startup and legal fees for any projects that the city would like to undertake. It's for cities with a population of fewer than 50,000 people, so Placerville fits that bill. It is a 50-50 match, so you would have to match dollar for dollar with them, and the award is anywhere from $50,000 to $300,000. And I would just like to say that you have a phenomenal city manager on your staff. We've been working very closely on these grant opportunities, and as soon as I sent this to him, he got right back to me and said, I've looked into this, and I think this would be a great opportunity for a sewer line out to the hotels that the city is planning on building. So just something to consider. And then a second option that I know a lot of the city council members have expressed is historical preservation. And there is a grant through the National Endowment for Humanities called the Sustaining Cultural Collections, and that will fund anywhere from $1 to $350,000 worth of historical preservation for large quantities of historical and cultural influence. And so there's no match with that grant, and it would be, I think, a very good opportunity for the city. So with that said, another thing I'd like to extend to the council is that if you ever have a grant or a funding opportunity that you think is a really good option for the city of Placerville, and you go ahead with an application, I highly recommend you coming out to Washington, D.C. Again, I'd like to thank Councilman Hagan for coming out in March. It was a great opportunity to put a face to a name and a city and tell them what our concerns are. And through grant applications as well, that's another great way to make sure that they're not just seeing a piece of paper, they are able to put a name to that piece of paper. And through that too, we would set up meetings with people on Capitol Hill as well as in the various departments so that you can also get a little insight into how the funding might be going for the next years and what kind of projects will be funded. So it's a really good way to also get some inside information that you might not otherwise get from not coming out to Washington. So with that said, again, I would like to thank the City Council and City Manager Morris for allowing me to come speak today. And with that said, I'll open that up to questions, and hopefully I can answer them to the best of my abilities.
Well, I must say, Madeline, you totally rocked that update. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We've all, of course, been following the news and, wondering, what the hell is going on over there. And so thank you for giving us your inside view, because you're in the thick of things. And
Yes.
Mr. Church, you have a real gem there with Madeline. I know you know that. Really appreciate
Well,
it.
thank you very much.
Vice Mayor Hagan, do you have any questions at this point?
Well, I just want to make clear one thing. We're not going to build a hotel. The city council's not. We're hoping to find some private investors who will build a hotel, and maybe we can help them out with some grants on the.
I was starting to get
rural
excited
story.
about that.
I know. You wanted to manage it. But no, and I appreciate all the time over the years. I mean, I've probably lost count of the trips back there, but I think there's 7 or 8. And David's office is always very courteous and kind in making sure that we get to our appointments and getting there, even if we can't use a little train between the Senate and the House any longer. But that's another story. So anyway, thank you again for being here.
Oh, you're welcome.
Councilmember Wilkins? Councilmember Bradley?
I just want to say that I just had a nice coffee with Madeline and David, and we talked about a lot of the things that Madeline just talked about, because obviously this is what we're all interested in, is just everything that she told us, and I know that they're working really hard, and particularly I think Madeline keeping her eyes open for grant situations, whatever, for our little city, and we do really appreciate it. And,
Oh, well, it's my pleasure.
yeah, so thank you. Thank you, David.
Councilmember Patton?
I just wanted to say thank you for that amazing amount of information you threw at us in, 10 minutes?
Yeah.
I am so in awe, and with no notes. You have like no notes in front of you. So thank you for what you do for the city.
Oh, you're
Appreciate
welcome.
it very much.
And I do have a couple of questions since you've come all the way out here. I'm going to pick your brain for a
Okay.
minute. All right. When was the last time the federal government shut down? Do we
I
know?
will let Mr. Church handle this one.
I think it was back during the Newt Gingrich era. I'm not entirely certain about that myself. We've had a couple of close calls. The difficulty with shutting down is that it costs so very much money to do that. First of all federal agencies in anticipation of closing down have to create shutdown plans. So we're spending millions of dollars anticipating a shutdown that will happen next week so that we can determine. I'm always kind of interested, however, and I'm diverting a little bit, but you see, essential workers still report for work and are paid. So the federal government doesn't go out of business entirely.
What's considered an essential worker?
Well, that's defined by each individual agency. I can assure you, every member of Congress is an essential worker. So they continue to do what they do and they get paid. Military armed personnel or uniformed personnel are essential workers. Some health and safety people are essential workers. The personnel in the White House are essential workers. I'm a little curious always, and I think this is a really legitimate concern between and among people in the conservative wing of America. If we have people on the federal payroll who are non-essential workers, why are they there to begin with? That's just a question I think about at 2:30 in the morning. And in any event, the answer to that is, I don't know the answer to the question. I think it may have been back in the Newt Gingrich days, but it's a really complicated and very expensive thing to anticipate shutting down the government. And if there is a single obligation the Congress has under its constitutional responsibilities, it is to fund the government. The executive branch has no independent authority to spend $1 of your tax money without the express authorization of the Congress.
So what will a shutdown of the government mean to the average American? And how long is it likely to last?
Oh, it's almost impossible for me to determine that. I think what's happening at the moment is that this shutdown is predicated on the whole debate over Obamacare. In that sense, there is a minority that, for all purposes, I think has really lost the fight. That is, there's no fight to be had. And correspondingly, I'm not sure that the Senate bill that goes back to the House won't be accepted by the House. The difficulty there is really leadership in the House that has to be responsive to their caucus, but at the same time, in this case, may depend on Democratic votes, thus violating the Hastert rule and threatening the existence of the leadership. So it gets to be politicians holding on to their elected positions within the House as to whether or not the House, given Democratic votes, we have the appropriations bills and we're home free. It's just the Obamacare things, but I can get into that at some length, and that's where you'll still be here at 11 o'clock or something. But I can tell you a couple of things. I don't know if do you want me to launch into Obamacare for 30 seconds or no?
I would like to,
Sure,
have you do that.
absolutely.
Well, let me make a couple of pronouncements then. First of all, Obamacare, to the surprise, I think, of so many conservatives, in its very essence, is a Republican bill. The philosophy behind Obamacare was conceived in places like the Heritage Foundation. Much of the bill, page for page, was written by Bob Dole as an offset to Hillary Clinton's proposal for medical reform. So in essence, we have a philosophy that comes out of the Republican Party, now opposed by Republicans because I suppose a Democratic president is taking credit for it, but above that, maybe they've had a change of heart about how all this philosophy should happen. So that's just the politics behind it. What I can tell you is that there is no practical chance that this bill and this program will be repealed. There is no practical chance anywhere in the realm of possibility that it's going to be defunded. Don't read about that very much in the papers, but that's the reality. First of all, talk about the funding, and on the funding, I have to be so careful because this is Washington speak, so I want to quote directly. We're talking about the funding. The funding for almost all of Obamacare is not dependent on discretionary appropriations, but is set within the letter of the law in non-discretionary funding that already comes to the government. And basically, whether you fund it or not, the Department of Health and Human Services has already determined they're not going to get any money out of the Republican House that's so opposed to the program. So the whole thing is funded until the end of the administration at least, and in many cases through the next 10 years. And that's its very essence, the Medicaid expansion. It's a permanent allocation. It has nothing to do with discretionary funding. The establishment of the exchanges is a part of the program. It's permanent funding. It's totally independent of any kind of discretionary funding. The rest, again, is HHS anticipating they're not getting any money, has already moved accounts around. So we have things like the Public Health and Prevention Fund. It is permanently funded for a decade. Much of that money is going to implement Obamacare. In the end, because this is the part I really had to run down to read to you, it's a congressional research report that was prepared for the Republican caucus last summer when they asked how could you defund or limit Obamacare, and they quote directly, the HHS could rely on, and then the quote is, sources of funding other than annual discretionary appropriations to support implementation activities, including multi-year and non-year discretionary funds still available for obligation, as well as mandatory funds. Is that beautiful, Washington speak? You gotta love it. So what's happening? We've had Senator Lee and Senator Cruz who asked for the House, the conservatives in the House, to establish very specific language. And the House did it. It is exactly what Cruz and Lee asked for. Cruz is now filibustering the Senate. By the way, that can only go on until tomorrow afternoon, should he last that long, because then he must yield the floor. So there's a time limit on the filibuster tonight. Nonetheless, it is exactly the language they asked for. Huge controversy now because the House conservatives are upset because they think they've been betrayed by Cruz and Lee, who are now opposing the law they wrote. Well, it's again Washington. You gotta love the place. In the end, this bill is going to pass because the Republican majority in the Senate is behind it. McConnell, Graham, McCain, Grassley, Cornyn are all going to support the passage of this bill. They're going to support its consideration, and after the Don't Fund Obama clause, which is fairly meaningless anyway, as we talked about earlier, is stripped from the bill, then it will go to final passage and it'll get sent back to the House. So in the end, I think there's so much uncertainty with this whole business of Obamacare. We don't know what it's actually going to do. The majority of Americans oppose this action. But do you know, not as many oppose this action as oppose the addition of Part D to Medicaid or Medicare when the Bush administration passed Part D for Medicare. We were hugely opposed as Americans to adding that provision to Medicare. Well, try to get rid of it today. So the real answer is Obamacare is here. We think there are lots of I think everyone would say, we know so little about a new experiment that we don't know all of its faults. We don't know how to make it work better. States are being given demonstration ability. Each state individually can try some things nobody else can try. If they work, we're going to let everybody do it, and if they don't work, well, no one else can try it. So there's no end answer to it other than it's going to be here, it's not going to be defunded, and it's not going to go away, because to repeal this law, you would have to have Republicans seize a veto-proof majority in both houses, a political impossibility, and the other alternative is Obama could change his mind and say, if you sent a bill up abolishing my program, I'd sign it. I don't think either's going to happen. I've taken up more time than you wanted to hear, but it's a fairly technical issue where there's no firm answers, and Americans are justified to question how this is going to come out. Not everything about the care is going to work the way it's supposed to. But, hospitals like it, insurance companies like it. Okay, most hospitals like it. They like it in part because it is a huge, we're going to talk about the local hospital at a different time. John and I are going to talk about that. But hospitals mostly like it because what happens now? So many Americans go to emergency room for their care. And instead of having a $200 bill at a doctor's office, they have a $4,000 bill at the emergency room, and you're paying for it, and you're paying for it, and I'm paying for it. And the system changes if we're all insured. I use the analogy, the broadest thing I can think about Obamacare is kind of, you took your car into the shop, and the way it is today, they replace an alternator, and they replace all the spark plugs, and they replace some filters, and maybe some wiring, and some other things, and you pay for it all, and you hope the car's going to run when it comes out, because if it doesn't, then they have to replace also the muffler or the brakes or something else. I guess that doesn't have to do with the running, but whatever it is. I'm not a mechanic. Obamacare simply says you take your car to the garage, and when you get it out, they make money if it runs, and they lose money if it doesn't. But because everyone will take their car to the garage, they'll make money if they're good at what they practice. That's not a bad analogy. I may use that somewhere else. I'm going to write it down.
You ought to take that on the road.
Anyway, I'm sorry to have taken up so much time. It's a complicated thing. It's a highly emotional thing. I think citizens in America who are concerned about it have an absolute right to be. We don't have all the answers, but it's going to happen, and we're going to find out what some of those answers are.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Church and Madeline, for coming all the way to Placerville to update us on these confusing times. And we certainly appreciate your ongoing efforts to help us as a city find funding for some of our challenges that await us daily. So we greatly appreciate it and look forward to working with you more this next year.
Well, thank you so much for listening to us. And with Ted Cruz, I'm always prepared to filibuster.
Thank you so much. Oh, wonderful. I do have a few more announcements on upcoming activities. This Saturday, I want to remind our community, we have our fall cleanup, community cleanup day, which is a wonderful, wonderful service that our own city staff helps coordinate, and this year, Mr. and Mrs. Zito are going to be heading up the activities along with Kelly from Finance Department, and Kiwanis is joining in the fun, so greatly appreciate the efforts of the Kiwanis Club. So it is from 8 to 2, Susan, at the Mosquito Park and Ride. You can bring your green waste, your trash, your would you like to fill us in again, Susan, on that?
No, you're doing very well. In addition to garbage and green waste, we also have Snowline Hospice there to accept gently used items.
Oh, that's wonderful. And El Dorado Disposal is providing the,
The dumpster,
Right.
multiple dumpsters, as soon as one's filled, they bring in another one, and by next Monday, we'll have a tonnage report.
wow, that's wonderful. Well,
We
thank you
have
again.
gotten a lot of phone calls at City Hall.
Great.
So I think we'll have a pretty busy day.
Well, this is a wonderful service you provide, and thank you for taking your Saturday to do that. So clean out your closets and go see Susan this Saturday. And then Sunday, I'd like to remind everyone there's an antique fair on Main Street. There will be a street closure from, I believe, 8 to 3 is the antique fair on Main Street. And the last thing I'd like to remind everyone, an upcoming event that is October 24th through the 27th, and it is the Halloween, Hangtown Halloween Ball. And the reason I'm mentioning it now is it's a 3-day event where it's getting to be a signature regional event that draws people from around the region. And they're anticipating about 4,000 people that will come to Placerville that weekend. And I make a mention of it because last year there was a challenge with our restaurants running out of food. So if you're a business, if you're a restaurant, gear up for the 24th through the 27th. And the events will be held at the fairgrounds. And it's a major concert with tons of bands that is, like I said, getting national following, or at least regional following. So just wanted to alert everyone to that. And it could be a raucous weekend. The noise will be, it will be filtering during the day, and I know we're coordinating with our police force to make sure that it works for everyone. But it's getting to be a nice
Breaking
event.
Scott in right.
Exactly, exactly. Any other announcements, Mr. Morris? No? All right. With that, we moved on to the closed session report. City Attorney Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The council didn't take reportable action tonight in closed session.
Thank you. With that, we have the adoption of the agenda. Are there any changes or additions to it?
Move for the adoption?
Second.
Been moved by Councilmember Borelli, seconded by Vice Mayor Hagan. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No? And with that, we come to item 6, always a favorite, ceremonial matters. This is a program that former Mayor Acunas started, I believe it was last year, where we highlight some of our businesses and residential properties that have just improved their properties and contribute to the beautification and the improvement of our fair city. And so this week, we have a Mayor's Beautification Award given to the Tractor Supply Company on 1360 Broadway. And do we have a representative from Tractor Supply here tonight in the audience? No, we don't. All right. So with that, we will present that award to them. We appreciate their presence here in Placerville, opening up another location, and appreciate the landscaping especially that has been done on Broadway and inside the parking lot.
They've sure changed the look of Broadway in that
Exactly,
area.
in a good way.
In a good
Yeah,
way. in a
really
good-
appreciate that. So, with that, we come to item number 7, public comment. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the council on any matter not on the agenda. And if you would like to address this council, please come to the podium. Please state your name for the record, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And actually, before we get to oral communications, is there any written communication?
No, thank you.
All right, with that, I will open up public comment. Anyone like to address this council? Good evening.
My name is Gina Hale, resident of Placerville for the past 7+ years on Upper Broadway. My husband and I were here earlier in the summer. I don't know if any of you remember. We were
Recognize you, yes.
quite upset. We still are a little on the upset side. Things have gotten a little bit better,
Okay.
but it's still really awful. It's still really awful up there. We're still dealing with garbage, litter, shopping carts. The homeless outnumber the residents in that area. It's just ridiculous. I'm on the bike trail 3 to 5 times a week. I see them up there loitering, littering, broken bottles, doing drugs, drinking. I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe in my own home. I don't feel safe on the bike trail. I don't feel safe walking down the street. I mean, it's just totally out of control. And we have a prostitute now that walks up and down the beat. It's just ridiculous. And none of the business care about any of the homeless people. They want them out of here, just like we do. I mean, I've been in constant contact with the police department over the summer. probably 3 to 4 times a day. And I'm just so frustrated still. Just, it's ridiculous. I don't understand. I mean, I'm hearing rumors that, is it true that it's going to be extended? Their stay at their present location, is that going to be extended? I'm hearing things that they're going to be moved, they're going to be extended. I mean, it just needs to go away permanently. This is just so bad for the community. It's so bad for the city of Placerville. I mean, these people have no respect for anybody, their property, the streets, the bike trail, businesses. They loiter, they litter. They just don't care. They own the whole city now because we've let them run the city. So I don't know if anyone can answer these questions
Once we close public comment, I'll address that. I'll make a
Okay.
comment.
You say in the Mountain Democrat that the homeless people are gonna govern themselves? What kind of psycho-
If you'd like to address this, council, please come forward, Mr. Hill, and make your comments. Then I will address it after we close public comment.
You tell them that they're gonna govern themselves and be in the Mountain Democrat after you clean up how many tons of trash out of the parks? You know what I'm talking about, Mountain Democrat.
Sure, sure.
The homeless people, they're going to govern themselves. I mean, come on. What is this? Escape from New York? I mean, felons. I mean, I got people masturbating at the end of my driveway. They're going to govern themselves.
I will address your comments after I close public comment. I hear your frustration and share it, and thank you for coming forward. Is there anyone else that would like to address this, council? All right, with that, I will close public comment, and let me address a couple of your issues. Number one, I had a meeting with City Manager Morris today and our new police chief Heller on this exact issue, and we will be looking at new tactics to address it going forward. I understand. I'm on Broadway all the time. I know what you're dealing with. As far as, there's a bunch of issues wrapped in this. As far as what will happen with Hangtown Haven, that will be coming before this council in November. And we will make that decision as a council. Nothing, of course, has been decided. We will address it publicly as a council. What you were referring to as the homeless residents governing themselves, that is referring to Hangtown Haven, which is the illegal encampment on Upper Broadway. And that is for those individuals that are wanting to be proactive in their own lives. There are rules and regulations at Hangtown Haven that include no drinking, no drugs, right? And that is what the article was referring to. That is governed by a resident council, which is overseen by a board of directors and community volunteers. And they do govern themselves with the community oversight. That said, there are several different kinds of populations of the homeless, and I don't mean to get into a big theory, but it's important to address these questions. There are individuals that don't wish to be a part of the solution, that choose homelessness as a way of life, that choose to be drunk and disorderly, and those are the individuals that we have perpetual problems with on the bike trail, Upper Broadway, and like Placerville Drive and throughout town. And those individuals, we were meeting with Chief Heller again today to talk about new Chief Heller has vast experience in Modesto, new ways to deal with that problem, that we will be proactive in the months and years to come in dealing with it. It's a problem that's not going to go away. It's a very challenging issue, and we will be taking this very, very seriously. So, Council, wait, this is not a back and forth here. We've closed public comment. I'm sorry. Please, I am available. Any of us are available. If you'd like to have a conversation, would be happy to do that. My contact information is on the city website, and I would be happy to meet with you at any time, as would city staff. So, Councilmember Patton?
I just, as long as we're having this conversation, would like to know, and I'm thinking that both Vice Mayor and the Mayor were at the county's, the supervisors meeting about the homeless issue, because what I've seen is that the city may be dealing with this in one vein, and the county may not be. So what are we doing to work collectively with the county? Are we taking measures together so that we approach this with a joint effort, rather than just the city doing something and the county not? I mean, are we working collectively, or Is it basically just a city issue?
Would you like to address that, Vice Mayor Hagan? You've been involved in that.
Well, it's at the workshop, the conclusion of the workshop was that the county is putting together a task force and working with us and with a report back by the end of October. And we will be part of that task force and the CAO's analysis. Mike Applegarth is going to be involved, and he's very involved, and has been for the last 3 or 4 years before. And that, and then different department heads will also be addressing that. And the county board wants a solution, wants to address it, wants to come together with some kind of a plan to work this through.
I just want to.
So we don't have any concrete answers yet,
Okay.
but we will have.
Well, one of the reasons that I bring this up is because just recently there was an incident very close to the city limit line, but it technically was in the county, where a friend of mine called the sheriffs to remove someone who was basically sleeping on, very much I'm sure what these people deal with on a daily basis. And the sheriffs, at the time it got there, the person had gotten up and was in the roadway of a private driveway, but still in the roadway, and they said that there was nothing that they could do. And I'm like, how can the city be proactive? And I'm not sure, I may have my facts, it's because it's very complex, but can the city go in to an area and remove illegal encampments? They post it for a couple, 3 days, and then they go in? I mean, I'm not
Actually,
really sure what the process
we're getting
is.
too involved in a discussion here because it's not an agenda item. So I think it's best to visit this when we put it on the agenda and have a full discussion with the public on it. But just a short answer, like Vice Mayor Hagan said, we are working collaboratively with the county. Absolutely, that is needed. So thank you for your comments, and we will continue to address this issue. And with that, we move on to item 8, the consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered routine and will be enacted by one motion by roll call vote unless any member of the council wishes to remove an item for discussion. Does any member of the council wish to do so? Does any member of the public wish to comment on an item on the consent calendar? Please come forward and state your name for the record. And state your question.
Michael Drobish, Placerville.
Good evening.
On 8.5, welcome, Mr. Heller. You've chosen wisely. Placerville is a great place to call home. Just a question on how many department heads we have and their base salary in comparison to our police chief. Are any of them higher?
Okay, note your question.
And then on item 8.6, a lot of questions. Just correct me if I'm wrong. It looks like the city will gain some key lands, the lowlands west of Kentucky Fried Chicken, spoken of for a dog park, what have you. The bridge nearby there, the Caboose area, the Goldbug Park or Cart area by Bedford. I'm mostly concerned looking at, I think it's sheet 6, the trail, Clay Street towards the Bedford overcrossing. It looks like it's going to stop short the land that Caltrans is going to give. So are we spending money on a dead-end trail that's going to stop short of the pedestrian overcrossing? These maps are kind of small, hard to look at that. And if it is, I'd plead that we don't waste money on a dead-end trail segment. I can ask staff on these other ones. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Michael. Any other comments on consent?
Sue Rodman, Placerville resident. On 8.6, it looked to me like we were getting the right-of-ways that we need to put together the bike trail going from Clay Street down to Bedford, and the bike trail to go from Ray Lawyer to the city limits thereby, or not to the city limits, but to Forney Road and Main Street there, where it comes together by Kentucky Fried Chicken. And when I looked at it, it looked to me like there was no cost to the city to do this. Is that true? And I think it's great, and I wanted to say, yay, go for it. I want to see that bike trail go the rest of the way through.
All right, thank you, Sue. All right, with that we will close public comment and bring it back to the council. Let's see. Vice Mayor Hagan?
I'm just wondering if we couldn't answer a couple of those questions that both Mike and Sue had on 8.6. As far as salaries of department heads, those are all public record, Michael, and you could check with Dave Warren if you really want to find those out. There is a very legitimate question, though, is that one section segment, it's actually between 11, 12, and 13. Pierre, maybe you can answer that question. It does look like a part that's retained by the highway, by Highway 50, or by Caltrans. Is that correct, or is that?
Yeah, Vice Mayor Hagan, I'll go ahead and turn this over to our city engineer, Mr. Stong. Should be able to answer that
I'm sorry, I didn't
question.
see him over there. He
No,
moved.
that's okay. We weren't sure he was going to make it, but he made it tonight.
Sheet,
Actually, I'm going to go ahead and pull 8 points. Before we get into a discussion, I'm going to pull 8.6 so we can get into a discussion on that.
Okay.
So is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So move.
Second.
except,
With the elimination of 8.6.
8.6, all right. It's been moved by Councilmember Borelli and seconded by Councilmember Patton. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Borelli.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Hagan.
aye.
Councilmember Patton.
Aye.
Mayor Thomas.
Aye.
Councilmember Wilkins.
Aye.
All right. As consent calendar passes, we will revisit 8.6 in just a second. There's no ordinances, no public hearings, there's no discussion items. Council member reports and requests for future agenda items.
We do those right after this.
Okay.
It's okay.
All right, so let's go ahead and address 8.6. So Nate, I believe you are up as far as helping explain if there's any cost to this, and does this stop short of finishing the bike trail? Okay, we'll get to that.
Sure, I'd be happy to give a brief presentation, but just maybe not a presentation, just get to the questions.
Perfect.
The Caltrans will be retaining a portion of the fee title land. That they'll keep ownership of that portion on the southeast side of Bedford at Highway 50. They need that for their operations. We will be able to construct the trail within that right-of-way under an encroachment permit, and that actually has been, just today, we've finalized the comments that we received on the trail, and some of those relate to the maintenance agreement. The elements of the trail are covered under the maintenance agreement in this item. The drainage facility, the culvert that runs under the trail. So they will keep ownership, but we will maintain it and be able to build it, and it will connect to them. So.
Right.
And then as far as cost, there is no cost associated other than staff time in negotiating the relinquishment and the
Wonderful.
agreements. So.
That's a heck of a deal. Councilmember Patton, did you have an additional question?
I do. Nate, on this section, well, it's pretty much, it's all along the, what's called the longitudinal barrier between Highway 50 and the parking garage, very slim sliver of land. But when that project came forward, the Revitalization Action Plan called for landscaping all along there. I've been really disappointed with Caltrans landscaping. And I thought that they were going to have to landscape all the areas that they touched. Is that not true?
I'm unaware of that. I'm sorry and I thought that was known to be relinquished to us for, operating our Christmas tree stands, and even in the beginning, we were going to mount the stands on the barrier that was, since denied by Caltrans as interfering with the structural integrity of the barrier. So we installed those Christmas tree stands behind it. But I'm not aware, I'm sorry, of requirement to landscape back there by either party.
Well, it's been in the works for ever since the Friedman Plan was developed, there was landscaping there, and then when Caltrans came forward with this project, we asked for the decorative treatments to the plans. They, at that time, they were hawthorn trees to be planted back there in between where the Christmas trees were, and so there was talk of how the irrigation would get in, and then lighting, and blah, blah, blah. But not just that particular section, that's just one section you can see as a whole, but even where the on-ramp from Placerville Drive comes up into Mainline 50, that has no landscaping. The off-ramps have no, it just seems like Caltrans has dropped the ball, and I thought that was a requirement that they do landscaping everywhere when they're done with the project. They come in and re-landscape it. Was there, I mean, did I just miss something?
I'll revisit that. I can get back to you.
That'd be
I know
great.
that they landscaped the areas that they worked, near Kentucky Fried Chicken, the slopes. Those are all re-landscaped under the bridge, the new connector bridge, Placerville Drive to Lower Main. Those have been planted, and it's within the agreement here that they maintain those for a certain term. I forget what it is, a couple more years.
So with these relinquishment maps, then now the city will take responsibility for the maintenance and/or landscaping. If there is none there, we'll have to landscape it now with our own budget.
Right. The area behind the longitudinal barrier is ours to maintain, and the on-ramp median that you talk about that's Caltrans. Actually, I think it's split down the
Well, the one
middle.
where they shaved off the hill too. I mean,
Right.
there's nothing there. So the longitudinal barrier stands out because it was actually defined in the Friedman plan. It was specific with species and the allocation of how many feet apart, blah, 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 but,
And the only thing that was installed back there was electrical conduit, and then we came in and pulled wiring and were able to light the trees. But
Right.
to my knowledge, there's no facility, irrigation, water, anything like that.
no, there's not to date, but I was under the impression that Caltrans was gonna do that, so, okay.
Not to my
If you'd
knowledge.
get back to me, I'd
I can
appreciate
get back
it.
to you, yeah.
Thanks.
Councilmember Burley?
Well, okay, am trying to remember too, Carol, I was thinking that several of those spots that Caltrans paid where the ore cart is and where the bell is, and I thought Rotary Park, because that's kind of I thought that they removed that and then agreed to put it back. I thought that was the agreement, more so than agreeing to.
Well, they actually paid Community Pride a sum of money.
Right.
Correct.
For the impacts to because those were Community Pride gardens.
Correct.
So they paid
So they
a
paid-
lump of
right.
sum to Community Pride, which is what's supposedly paying for the Bell Garden and some
And
of
they're
the other
supposed to
things.
bring it back.
But that's independent. I mean, those are just specific little gardens. I'm referring to pretty much the entire Caltrans project that I was under the impression they had to come in and landscape some of those areas. And I'm getting.
All right, thank you. Vice Mayor Hagan?
No.
Councilmember Wilkins? No? All right, is there any member of the public that wishes to comment on this item?
I have a few more. Has the
State your name for the record again.
Michael Drobish Placerville.
Thank you.
Speaking as a citizen. Has the Judge Mall Park, where the Christmas tree is, has that strip of land always been Caltrans? 'Cause it looks like they're relinquishing it to us. So we've been using it all these years.
Okay, well, go ahead and ask all your questions and we'll get those answered.
And what about the little sliver of land directly north of City Hall? If you see in the map, the boundary is, you would not be able to use the little bit of land with the Christmas trees and be able to pass over to Center Street. This is great that this is zero cost to the city, and then we'll now have control of these lands, and we don't have to look at dead weeds for ever. So thank you to staff for working this out.
All right, thank you, Michael. Any other member of the public? With that, I'll close public comment. And so just confirmation that the Judge Mall land, it was Caltrans property, Nate?
Yes.
Yes, okay, yes is the answer. All right. And with that,
And the other question, the area out in front of City Hall that Michael's talking
Oh,
about
yes.
is the structure for the pedestrian overcrossing, and Caltrans will maintain everything up to the deck, the structure of the pedestrian overcrossing, so it's important that they retain land ownership there.
okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. With that, bring it back to the council for a motion.
I'll move for 8.6.
Second.
Been moved by Councilmember Burley, seconded by Vice Mayor Hagan. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And with that, we are on council member reports and requests for future agenda items. We'll start with you, Vice Mayor Hagan.
I had I had several meetings, but I had no scheduled meetings for SACOG or any of the commissions I'm on. Do have a meeting tomorrow morning with the Transportation Commission And we've had the transportation meeting, I believe it was just before our last city council meeting, or just after. And there was nothing significant. There were just updates on most of the projects that are going on in the area. The one noted is the on-ramp that the city's involved with, the westbound from Ray Lawyer Drive, is moving along, I would say, ahead of schedule. The westbound on-ramp to El Dorado Hills, Latrobe Road, is about 1 year ahead of schedule. They're expecting to finish that in October, November of this year, and it was scheduled to be not completed until next year. So that contractor is moving very quickly. They've had some good weather. And I believe Doug Veerkamp is working well, and I think we're ahead of schedule on that also, aren't we, Nate?
We're about on schedule. It's
Okay.
coming up on cold temps. We were supposed to be paving the rubberized, open graded course this evening, but the temperatures are dropping, so they had to delay that. So
Okay.
we're about right.
They're
It's
doing
cutting
some
it close.
paving today, I know that, but.
Yep.
And then we have a SACOG, I have a SACOG meeting Thursday, which is going to be with the housing element and the updates for our transportation planning that we did, seems like we just completed 2012. It's got to be done every 4 years. And we're also concerned about the continuation of transportation funding. MAP 21 was a 2-year bill, and so hopefully this next October transportation funding can go back to a 6-year cycle again. It's very important because of planning for major roads. You have to at least look that far out. It takes so long to get through the process. Anyway, so that's kind of it. There's some stuff going on. I know that we're going to be talking about is revitalizing a first-tiered suburb, and the mayor, former mayor of the city of Rancho Cordova, David Sanders, will be speaking on this to SACOG, and he has done a number of works and studies in that area. The city of Rancho Cordova has done a number of improvements to their city through what used to be revitalization or redevelopment. And they're looking at trying to find additional ways to do that in the future. Continue. So that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Wilkins?
Last Saturday, I went to Casey's Ride downtown Placerville, and it was, I don't know because I hadn't gone to all of them, but it was huge, and I think it was the biggest one. It started off because I got there early, and there was like a few bikes here and a few there, and I thought, oh, well, this is kind of cool. But by the time it was over at 10 o'clock, there wasn't a blank spot. Both sides were covered in bikes. And Casey's Ride is to benefit the Center for Violence-Free Relationships. And they had the silent witnesses set up, and they had some really touching speakers. And you could sign a pledge, and it was just really touching, and it was really awesome to see these cool bikers there, and for such a heartfelt cause. So that was that Saturday, and then I also had a transit meeting, and of course there's still ping pong upstairs on Mondays and Wednesdays. And then that's
Thank you, Councilmember Wilkins. Councilmember Borelli?
I also had a transit meeting and a transportation meeting. The staff member Woody and I gave a presentation on our trip to Canada with the Chamber of Commerce, and talked about some of the things that were presented at that meeting and how we could use maybe some of that here in our little community. I went with Wendy to a 2x2 meeting at the county with the supervisors and our city manager and the county CEO. I attended the Oktoberfest in the rain. It was so sad because they did such a great job. They had so many different food booths and everything, and I was heartened that there were some people that did show up. And the Oompa band and everything. But anyway, And then as I said earlier, I met with David and Madeline and had a really nice meeting with them.
Thank you. Councilmember Patton?
Well, I missed Casey's Ride this year. It's one of the first ones I've missed in a couple of years, but it's near and dear to my heart, and my heart goes out to the family of Lee Woolery, who was killed on a motorcycle accident just outside of Jenkinson Lake. So, and I hope that the ride continues. I know it was really difficult for Pat, the man who spoke a couple weeks ago here, on him at the loss of the life. So, that being said, I had the opportunity to go down south to the Central Coast, and I, on Thursday night, went to San Luis Obispo and walked their farmers market, and was absolutely amazed at the not only the amount of vendors, but the amount of humans. I know it's a bigger city and all of that, but my point is, there's no parking. There's no parking close to that farmers market. We probably walked 4 blocks to get in to the city center where it was. Then the next night, I think it was Friday night, excuse me, there was another market at Avila Beach where I was actually staying. They had theirs right on the boardwalk. Again, no parking right adjacent to the farmer's market. It was a block, at least a block and a half away. And so, but both of these, and this is my point with our farmer's market, they were linear in shape. So, and someone just spoke to me about the El Dorado Hills market and how the difference of the layout of the market flows traffic better. So I'm just wondering if, as we go through this process of the farmer's market and maybe moving it to a different site, if we can't possibly wrap our heads around a different layout that is easier for the customer. It's not so chaotic. You can kind of understand it better. Because both of those markets that I was just at were very, very popular and very well received. And I think that our market is hugely popular. And I'm not afraid to change it a little bit to make it better. So that's all. I just wanted to point out that there are other markets very successful that are a little bit different that might make ours better.
Great.
And I have a LAFCO meeting tomorrow night.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief here. I had a really interesting meeting with Steve Shervey and Vicki Ludwig. They are representatives on the El Dorado County Commission on Aging, and they gave a report to me on what their work has been this last year. And I think it's really important for us as a community to understand our demographics. We are an older community, and in fact, El Dorado County is the oldest county in the state of California. And when we really understand it, it helps us know which way to go as we're making decisions. The citizens, right, yeah, not just our infrastructure, which is old too. We know that. For example, these are pretty staggering. Over 60 population. In 2010, we had roughly 40,000 people that were over 60. In 2030, it's estimated that we will have around 73,000. That's an 83% increase. Now, over 85, in 2010, we had 3,116. In 2030, it's anticipated that we will have over almost 6,100 people that will be over 85. That's a 95% change. And the point of this is, as a community, perhaps we need to think about courting the senior in their next 50 years. And a lot of, yeah, including Carl. And what that means is a lot of people are coming up to Placerville and retiring in the foothills. These are people that have money, that are looking for quality of life, and really planning that in our community. And what this commission was suggesting is that perhaps our Park and Recs department that does a fabulous job for our community, perhaps we incorporate senior classes. Maybe if you're 85, you don't want to be in a yoga class with a 23-year-old, perhaps having, senior classes. There's also new ideas coming on the horizon of senior playgrounds and I love that concept of I'd like to see Carl on the swings. No. Yeah, but having, exercise equipment and things that seniors can go out, be social, and exercise. So that was just a very, I thank Susan Zito for encouraging that meeting and setting that up. I think those are important things to realize. Also attended the city potluck this last week and really wanted, Dave, your team on the first floor did an amazing job setting up our end of the summer city staff potluck, and it's always fun to break bread together as a city and staff, and really enjoyed that. And thank you for all the work on that. I'd also like to thank our supervisor, Brian Veerkamp. He has been coordinating with Caltrans pretty heavily these last couple of weeks, and what he's working on is coordinating our stoplights on Highway 50. And perhaps you noticed that traffic was flowing a little better this last weekend, and that's because Caltrans, it was, they've timed them, I think it's about 6 minutes apart. They're trying different models to how we can get traffic moving more freely on Apple Hill weekends and fall weekends while still allowing our residents to go around town. So we're trying some models, and Brian Veerkamp is leading, our Supervisor Veerkamp is leading that charge. So I want to thank him for his efforts. And lastly, on the Paint What Matters, I know you haven't heard much from us. Benjamin Moore, we just heard from them today again. They have finalized all of their city visits, and they've had to fire their production company that they had hired to coordinate all this. They've hired another one. So they've been a little bit in transition, which is just fine. That's to be expected on a first-year project. But the good news is that we will be meeting with the representatives. They're going to be coming out on October 11th, and we will have more answers then. So really want to thank Lisa Crummett of the Downtown Association, who's spearheading this charge, and we've been in constant contact with them, and moving forward slowly, but we'll have more answers soon. So just wanted to alert you to that. All right, Mr. Morris, you're up.
14.1.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to turn it over to Dave Warren just quickly to answer a few questions that were brought up regarding our parking enforcement program.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cleve. Thank you, Council. This is a follow-up to the questions and comments raised by Sue Rodman about the downtown parking program at your September 10th meeting during public comment. And specifically, Sue had asked, when and why did the city begin outsourcing parking citation processing services? And would the city save any money by having city staff perform these services? The answer to these questions is the city began contracting with Enforcement Technology, which is now known as Duncan Solutions, back in July of 1992, and has continually provided services to the city for the past 21 years. As part of its services, it maintains a database of all citations. It issues and mails first and second notices as necessary, provides collection efforts for all citations, places DMV holds on vehicle owners who don't pay their citations, and adjusts citation amounts due to court action. It also communicates and processes appeals to the city, and maintains a trust account on behalf of the city. Lastly, it prepares monthly statistical reports and accounting of issued collection citations. So Duncan charges a $1.41 per citation for these services and 75 cents per correspondence as needed. Duncan charged the city $830 to process 579 citations in fiscal year 2012-2013 at an average cost of $1.43 per citation, which is very reasonable. Duncan is able to provide its automated services inexpensively by achieving economies of scale by contracting with several local government agencies for its services. And it would be very difficult for the city to be able to provide the same level of service for an equal or lesser cost. Additionally, the city would incur one-time costs associated with the software and staff training to get up to speed to provide that service. So the other question Sue raised was, or a proposal of decreasing the amount of free parking in the downtown area from 2 hours to 1 hour as a way of generating additional revenues to be used to maintain the city's parking lots, which they need work. So staff has considered recommending this change to the daily parking policies and concurs with Sue that it would generate much needed revenues to maintain the city's parking lots. By doing so, it would generate approximately $19,000 a year in additional revenues. So staff plans on meeting with the parking committee as we discussed in our budget deliberations to discuss the needs and opportunities of operating, maintaining your city downtown parking lots, and also review the 2-hour parking policy.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Warren. So to clarify, the city does retain the revenue for the parking fines in addition, over and above the fee that they charge?
That's correct.
Okay, great. Just wanted to clarify that.
There is some fees that are set aside for the courts. There's $12.50 per citation.
Right. All right. Thank you very much. Any other questions from staff? All right. Thank you very much for getting back to us on that, and we look forward to the parking committee's recommendations on this item. All right. Upcoming items.
Madam Mayor,
yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. It's City
Oh,
Engineer
there we go.
Strong over here. I thought I'd take this moment to provide an update on the Cedar Ravine sewer relocation project.
Oh, wonderful.
As you know, we're under construction during the day with a detour in place, utilizing Marshall Way, Corker Street, and Washington. A couple of upcoming construction items will require extending that closure period through the night, and including starting tomorrow, they're going to be performing the creek crossing, and that will open up the shoulder. Will need to be excavated, so it'll be tough to return that to a safe condition for the night. So I wanted to give the council an update that we'll be closing the road tomorrow night and Thursday night, and making sure that it's open for Friday night and the weekend. And then next week, Monday night and Tuesday night, do the same thing for excavation of the manhole. It's a deep manhole, and it's requires a large area, and the road is undulating for the curves, and it's difficult to plate at night and provide a safe environment. So we're going to build the whole thing and then open the road Wednesday. It'll still be detour conditions, but just during the day.
How are things flowing around there with the detour and things going
Very
pretty
good.
smoothly?
I haven't heard any complaints. None have been forwarded to me. So
Great, and the residents are able to get in and out of their houses? And
everybody has access, and after the first day, they got used to it.
Great.
So.
Well, thank you for all your efforts.
And
That's,
slow going. Yesterday, we achieved 20 feet of
Woohoo!
sewer. So it's pretty rocky in there.
well, it's a very worthwhile project, and thank you so much for all your efforts on that. All right. So with that, our upcoming items, on October 8th, 2013, that will be our next council meeting. Will include the Blair's Lane Bridge, a leak detection system, and Highway 50 associated documents, and a 5 p.m. closed session, 6 p.m. regular session. And with that, we are adjourned, and good night, Placerville.